I came across an interesting piece of news that, of course, wasn't appreciated by either the scientific community or ordinary people. However, it will be interesting for those who have delved into the topic of Hydra. The link to the Hydra playlist is under the video. After reading the article, I'll share my comments. The discovery made by biologists will make us rewrite human anatomy textbooks. On the left is the lymphatic system as it was depicted in textbooks, and on the right is the current understanding of it. Antoine Louva, a professor at the laboratory of the Virginia Health System University, made an amazing discovery in the anatomy of the human brain. When he was studying the dura mater, the membrane structure covering the brain in mice, he came up with a dissection method that allowed him to preserve this membrane structure intact. After successfully performing the procedure, the professor noticed vessels covering it, which upon closer examination turned out to be the long-sought vessels of the lymphatic system. Even though scientists have been studying human anatomy for thousands of years, there are still mysteries in the body that remain undiscovered to this day. For example, until recently, scientists did not know how the brain interacts with the body's lymphatic system, how the immune system works with the brain, or how waste products are removed from it. The lymphatic system is a part of the vascular system in vertebrate animals, complementing the cardiovascular system. It plays an important role in metabolism, cleansing the body's cells and tissues, and in the functioning of the immune system. With its help, waste products from the internal organs are returned back into the bloodstream. Until recently, scientists could not find lymphatic vessels in the cerebral cortex. It was believed that its biological waste was removed through the sinuses of the dura mater. It was unclear how its immune system was supposed to work in that case. Even modern methods like magnetic resonance imaging did not provide an answer to this question. Kelvin Lee, Doctor of Biological Sciences and Chair of the Department of Neurology at University of Alaska, Fairbanks University, describes his reaction to this discovery like this. The first time these guys showed me the result of their work, I said only one thing: we'll have to rewrite all the textbooks. The central nervous system was never known to have a lymphatic system. And based on the results of that work, which we later confirmed many times, it became clear that they would fundamentally change people's understanding of how the central nervous system interacts with the immune system. The head of the laboratory where Louva made this discovery, Jonathan Kipnis, was initially quite skeptical. I couldn't believe that you could find structures in the body that were previously unknown. I thought everything had already been mapped out long ago and that discoveries in this area ended back in the middle of the last century. Obviously, that's not the case. This unexpected discovery raises more questions than answers. For example, in Alzheimer's disease, large chunks of proteins accumulate in the brain. Kipnis explains that this may be due to the fact that they simply aren't removed from the brain efficiently enough through these lymphatic vessels. It is already known that with age, lymphatic vessels start to look different. Their further close study may shed light on the causes of brain diseases and ways to treat them, from Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis to autism. It should be noted that the methodology for studying living tissues was invented back in the 19th century. However, these microscopes were banned and biologists are still studying dead tissues to this day. And it's impossible to study lymph this way because after a cell dies, it's very difficult to distinguish it from the cells of the human body. Because Hydra is still water after all. Thus, it can be said that biologists still didn't really know anything about lymph. And then they start to wonder, what is lymph doing on the brain, on the gray matter? And they do this based on the assumption that lymph cleanses the body and that without it the body simply couldn't survive. This study revealed the fact that lymph also surrounds the optic nerves. The idea that nerves also need to be cleansed of toxins is complete nonsense. And what processes can occur in the optic nerve? Maybe something is being digested or contaminated there. If we assume that the lymph is a separate organism embedded in the human body and it has its own nervous system and even some kind of its own consciousness, then of course there is. It would want not only to feed through the person, as it does, to feel through the person, to influence their behavior by connecting to brain activity, but also to see through their eyes. Basically, demons that try to penetrate a person's consciousness, this is called obsession, do it in order to replace human consciousness with their own and live life instead of the person. Perhaps by the age of 40, the lymph becomes a mature entity and can start taking over control. But there are many discussions about this. That's for next time. And it is around this age of 40 that vision usually starts to deteriorate. For some it happens much earlier or later, but those are exceptions. Moreover, the deterioration usually happens quickly because the lymph can quickly affect the optic nerves. It has already prepared everything and connected itself. This can even happen in a single day, like it did with me. It happened in just one day. This is why you might experience effects from external interference, like uneven vision deterioration. One eye sees one way, the other sees differently. It all depends on how asymmetrically the connection is made. Ophthalmologists claim that it's all about the lens, and maybe that's true because affecting the nerves causes all sorts of effects on the eye muscles and makes them spasm. And here I come to a very interesting observation that the Earth's population of 7 billion has not discovered yet. It would seem that with poor vision, the focus should just look uniform. However, when I look at contrasting figures, individual ones, for example, the letter S or the number 6, it doesn't matter if it's black on white or white on black, I see from 3 to 6 symbols slightly shifted relative to each other. Notice they appear clearly as 3 to 6, or give or take. Moreover, in one eye there may be more of these duplications, in the other less, and they are arranged differently. And that's the only reason the blurring effect occurs, not because everything just became blurry like that. No, take a closer look. You need to study this. You have to focus on it somehow. What if it's multiple duplications of the image with an offset? That's a consequence of digital signal delay. After all, you have to understand that visual signals can still be represented digitally. How does this information transfer occur? It could be an entirely different type of digital signal. But nevertheless, when we connect, we get digital effects or analogs of digital effects. If these really are foreign connections, do we need to cut the lens with a laser to restore it? Or maybe it's better to remove the foreign implants found on the optic nerves. And then the vision will become single again, which means it will return to normal. The same goes for obesity. Why does a person suddenly start gaining so much weight, becoming bulkier, turning into something like a hog? Even the skull gets bigger. Look, before the skull was like this, and then it became like this. Why would a person's skull expand like that from fat? Did the fat really stretch the skull? Fat is supposed to be on the outside, and then people say, that's just big bones. But it's not just layers of fat accumulating on the outside, it's actually the growth of something between the layers of human tissue. And it turns out to be the same thing. This lymph builds its own body inside the human body, and as a result a person carries two bodies at the same time and eats for two bodies. In fact, the lymph body eventually becomes bigger than the human body. People can weigh anywhere from 40-50 kg and up to 150 kg, which is several times heavier. The same can be said about nutrition. A person's body with this lymphatic body eats 6 times or more often than a person needs for normal activity. A person actually only needs to eat once every 3 days, but sometimes we get to the point where we eat up to 6 times a day, or even better, every half hour. Here we also need to take one more thing into account. In our assumptions, we believe that lymph actually exists in a person, as biology describes it. It really does cleanse the blood and performs necessary functions, but it makes up only a small percentage of the body's mass and doesn't expand in any way. Here, however, when we call it lymph, we are talking about that hybrid entity that was introduced into the human genome, supposedly in the 18th century, based on the DNA of the freshwater Hydra. Check out the Hydra playlist on the channel below this video. And this very hybrid entity, which is presented as the lymphatic system and grows within the human body, takes over control, forming desires and focusing its attention on its own needs. As we can see, it can rapidly increase its mass and is very eager to connect to the organs of vision and hearing in order to fully use the person as an avatar for feedback. Just like energy parasites, and most likely they act together, piling on all at once to overcome the person's resistance. These are the interesting assumptions we can make from the information published in the article we reviewed. Subtitles created by